The somber tallies keep mounting tonight in the aftermath of Hurricane Irma. The death toll has risen to 55. Many thousands are struggling to get back home across Florida, and officials are rushing aid to the state's hardest hit areas. PJ Tobia begins our coverage.
Roads leading to the shattered Florida Keys reopened early this morning. People lined up in cars, anxious to return to their homes, or whatever remains of them, and tensions were running high.
Right now, we don't know where to go.
Some found lawns filled with debris, siding ripped off their houses, trailer homes and boats knocked over like toy models. Governor Rick Scott flew over Florida's coast on Monday.
If you're in the Keys, you've seen the pictures. The trailer parks, I mean, it's like everybody just tipped everything over. You're just praying that everybody's alive. We're still having, I've been talking to the people down there, we're still having in the Keys issues with getting the water started back up, sewage, and their power back up.
Scott says the bridges linking the Keys do not appear damaged, but he urged caution as engineers make inspections.
Even though you can see that people are traveling, you're not sure that on the bridges they can take any significant weight.
In Washington, head of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, gave a somber assessment.
25% of the houses initially have been destroyed and 65% have major damage. Basically every house in the Keys was impacted in some way or another. This is why we ask people to leave.
All told, 6.5 million Floridians were asked to leave before the storm, one of the largest evacuation orders in U.S. history. Today, many who were part of the mass exodus sat in lines of traffic on their way back in. Some are returning to beachfront homes beyond repair. Nearly all will find they have no power. Millions lost electricity during the storm, and Florida's largest power company says they'll have longer to wait before it's restored.
The eastern portion of Florida had less damage in some respects than the western side of our state. So along the eastern seaboard, if you will, the eastern portion of our territory, we expect to be essentially restored for all customers by the end of this coming weekend. As far as the west coast of Florida, if you will, we expect to have all of our customers essentially restored by Friday, September 22nd.
Flooding has compounded the woes, especially in Jacksonville in North Florida. After the St. Johns River and its tributaries overflowed onto main roads yesterday, parts of the city were still submerged today.
I'm a born and raised native of Jacksonville. We've never had anything like this in the park. I survived Hurricane Irma in 1964. We had canoes, people in canoes going up and down the street because there was flooding, but never anything like this in our city ever that I've ever seen.
Underwater and without electricity, Jacksonville area residents are concerned that the area's frequent high tides could mean that waters like this will stick around for some time to come. Floodwaters inundated neighborhoods in the town of Middleburg today, a half hour from downtown Jacksonville. Some residents returned to save their pets. Adding to the region's misery, life without air conditioning in 80-plus degrees.
It's pretty hot. I think the next couple of days is probably going to really test our patience.
In many places, like Daytona Beach, the water has receded, and homeowners now confront the hard work of recovery.
And all this was like a river. Everything's like a river. And even my backyard, it was bad. It was probably the worst one I've seen. I've been here for 15 years.
Meanwhile, Miami Beach reopened today despite widespread power outages. And flights resumed at airports across South Florida. States to the north also face major cleanups and recovery. As Irma passed yesterday, Charleston, South Carolina saw everything from waterspouts off the coast to storm surge flooding downtown streets. Flooding and power outages also plagued parts of Georgia, but the governor lifted a coastal evacuation order today. Here in North Florida, recovery from Hurricane Irma has just begun. But local officials have told me that it could be as long as 3 days before floodwaters like those behind me even begin to recede. Earlier today, President Trump said that he'd be coming to the state on Thursday to survey the damage himself. John?
PJ, if the center of the storm went up the west coast of Florida, why is there so much flooding, and why was flooding so bad on the east coast where you are?
That's a good question. Yeah, I'm about 30 minutes right now southwest of Jacksonville. So yeah, on the eastern part of the state. The way that Irma's wrath was primarily felt here was as a rain event, although there was quite a bit of wind knocking down power lines, which is the reason so many are without power tonight. But there was so much rain, many inches, historic highs in some places. So rivers and creeks just burst their banks. This part of Florida, like much of the state, is low country, so folks are used to occasional floods a few times a year. Most of that is tidal flooding. When the tide comes in, there may be floods. When it goes out, the water quickly recedes. But add in all that rain, and you have water that sticks around for a long time, as so many officials fear.
And PJ, you're up near the Georgia border, but you've been running into a lot of people who evacuated from the Florida Keys. What have they been telling you?
Yes, Central and North Florida were considered a place of refuge for folks from the Keys. We were in Orlando yesterday. Don't forget, Orlando's 5 hours or more from some parts of the Florida Keys. So in the hotels and restaurants while they were open, you'd see these folks. And at first, late last weekend, over the weekend, they were just happy to be out of the storm's wrath. Better safe than sorry, they told me. But now that they're seeing the pictures from their hometowns and folks who remained are calling them, I spoke with one woman who said she was actually kind of angry. She heard that her property, she actually owns 2 homes, her properties were more or less okay, and she desperately wants to get back to the Keys to check them out, to clean up any debris, to see if there is any damage, say, to the roof, to prevent any further damage if it rains more. So there's actually quite a bit of anger that they left, and now they may not be able to get in because bridges may be out and roads may be closed.
You know, the folks down there in Florida have been on edge about this storm for more than a week now. What's the mood like? What are people feeling?
Yeah, people are definitely getting a bit cranky. The storm came this weekend, so folks have been without power in some cases for a few days. Only a very few restaurants and gas stations are open, so getting something to eat or filling up that gas tank can often be an hours-long affair. People are pretty tired of eating granola bars and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And so there's that. And then in addition, you know, public security officials, disaster rescue, first responders are exhausted. They've been on call, some of them, for more than a week. Today, we actually encountered a convoy of fan boats and other shallow water craft coming from neighboring states like Louisiana and Mississippi to help give some relief to those first responders who have been doing so much to try and help their communities so that they can go home and check on their own homes and their own families, John.
A lot of hard work down there, including you, PJ Tobia, and producer Steve Moore. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, John.
Officials in Jacksonville have many immediate concerns, but the flooding presents some long-term challenges. I spoke a little while ago with Jacksonville Mayor Lenny Curry. Mayor Curry, welcome. Can you tell us what's the latest? What's the latest situation in Jacksonville right now?
Well, we're now in recovery mode. Yesterday turned into rescue day all day. So we knew this was going to be a serious event. I issued mandatory evacuations. In fact, voluntary evacuations started last Wednesday. We told people they would be mandatory by Friday, and it was just that. We knew even though it was moving west, it was still going to be serious. We told our people it was going to be a major event. And what happened yesterday morning is we recognized with new information that we had Category 3 hurricane-type storm surge coming, even though it was a tropical storm that went through. So we had to move quickly yesterday morning and have people that did not evacuate to call us. We asked them to put white flags out on their doors somewhere where we could visibly see them from the road. And our rescue crews went in with the help of state agencies as well and saved over 300 people yesterday.
You say you're in a recovery mode right now. What's the biggest problem? Is it the water, the flood waters? Is it the lack of power?
Yeah, the water has started to recede. Getting power back up and running. We have an independent power utility here, the JEA. So they are working to restore power. Some of their challenges are down trees, blocking roadways. So there's cut and toss crews that are clearing roads so they can get up and restore that power.
What's your biggest concern right now, and what's your most pressing need?
We've got a lot of needs. I want to ensure that our people have water in the time of waiting to get their power restored. Most important thing is I want to get people's electricity back up and running. And then we just have to rebuild. You know, we're going to have infrastructure issues, but we'll get through all that. The most important thing is individual lives. And the best of our best stepped up yesterday, first responders, including neighbors, and helped each other. And, you recognize the simple things, the ability to have a cup of coffee with someone you care about, or spend some time with them is what matters. So we want to get power restored and get everyone's life back to normal.
How long is that going to take to get all the power back?
They're working aggressively. They haven't put a specific deadline on that. We did secure nighttime construction lights. I called the governor before the storm, so the big lights you see used on interstates when they're doing road work. We secured a number of those before the storm so our crews could work at night. And the utilities secured additional assets, so additional manpower and trucks in place. And we're just going to push them hard. We're going to push each other hard, grind it out to get people back up and running.
Mayor Lenny Curry of Jacksonville, Florida, we wish you well on the road to recovery.
Thank you.
We now turn from Jacksonville to the Florida Keys. Irma devastated that string of islands. I spoke with David Ovalle of the Miami Herald, who was in Key West when the hurricane hit and traveled back along the Keys yesterday.
It was very hard to tell the extent of the damage because there was still a lot of areas you could not get to. But certainly it looked like a war zone. There was downed trees everywhere. There was boats that were flipped up on the road. There was trailer parks that were just completely demolished. It looked like they were just smashed by a bomb. But there was also a lot of neighborhoods, even near the epicenter, even at Cudjoe Key, where the eye wall came across the Florida Keys, there were neighborhoods that were intact. And there was these big concrete structures with basically on stilts. The first level is just designed for the storm surge to pass underneath it. So it's still hard to say the extent of the damage. Certainly almost every house in the Keys was damaged, but I think it's too early to say that they were actually obliterated.
And what were conditions like? I mean, was there water? I doubt there was power.
There's definitely no power in the Keys. There's no cell phone service. There, for the perhaps 10,000 people that are still in the Florida Keys, it's going to be a very uncomfortable couple of weeks. There's a lot of worried residents who are worried about their homes that are outside of Miami and their families. So it's going to be a long, hot slog for a lot of people, and the officials are really telling people not to try to come back too soon because they don't need any more mouths to feed.
And did you have any trouble getting up US 1? I mean, the officials have been talking about they're worried about the conditions of the bridges, which are essentially the entire length of US 1.
We didn't have any real trouble getting up. A couple hours after the storm, we couldn't get past a certain bridge, I believe, after Little Torch Key because there was just too much debris. But by the morning, they had already started clearing everything. So we had to maneuver around a lot of debris. There's just, I mean, levels of seagrass that were just clogging up the roads. So we had to be very careful. We ended up bursting a flat as we were going back up. But we did make it back, and so you can do it. But certainly they need to make sure it's 100% for all the supplies you're going to have to bring in.
And what were the people who rode out the storm, who stayed in the Keys during the storm? What were they telling you?
A lot of the people who stayed in the Keys are very independent-minded. They're very strong. They don't want to be away from their businesses. They don't want to be away from their homes. And they felt they could do it. There's so many hurricanes that have come past the Keys, and some have hit, most have not. But I think a lot of them thought, hey, you know what? I'm going to ride this out. And frankly, there's a lot of people of low economic means, people who are elderly, people on fixed incomes, immigrants who work in the hospitality service, people with dogs. A lot of people just didn't feel they could get out, and they ended up riding out the storm in the refuges of last resort.
David Ovalle, the Miami Herald, thanks so much for sharing your firsthand experience.
Thank you. Appreciate it.